Imagine waking up one morning to discover that an army of 300,000 men is marching toward your city, and you have just 11,000 soldiers to stop them. Now, imagine that if you fail, not just your city, but the entire course of Western civilization will be rewritten. That's not the plot of some fantasy novel. That's exactly what happened in Vienna in the summer of 1683, and what followed was one of the most desperate sieges and one of the most spectacular battles in human history. This is the story of how a handful of defenders held the line against impossible odds, and how the largest cavalry charge ever recorded turned the tide of an empire. The summer of 1683 was brutally hot across Europe, but the heat wasn't the only thing making people sweat. A monstrous force was moving across the Hungarian plains, and its destination was clear: Vienna, the gateway to the heart of Europe. This wasn't just an army, it was a leviathan of war, stretching for kilometers across the landscape. Soldiers, engineers, servants, camp followers, all marching under the banner of the Ottoman Empire, led by one of the most ambitious men of his age, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha. To the Ottomans, Vienna was known as the Golden Apple, a prize that had eluded their grasp for over a century. If they could take it, the road to Rome, to Paris, to the entire continent would be wide open. This was the moment the Ottoman Empire had been building toward for generations. The sheer scale of this invasion sent shockwaves of terror through every European court. Contemporary estimates put the Ottoman force at around 300,000 men. 300,000. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the population of most European cities at the time. And what did Vienna have to defend itself? 11,000 regular soldiers and maybe 5,000 citizen militia who had probably never held a musket before in their lives. Do the math on that. 20 attackers for every single defender. When Emperor Leopold I heard the Ottomans were coming, he did what any brave leader would do. He ran. He grabbed his entire court and fled the city, leaving the citizens to face their fate alone. The defense of Vienna fell to Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a career soldier who suddenly found himself responsible for holding back the largest military force in the known world with what amounted to a skeleton crew. On July 14th, the Ottoman army completed its encirclement of Vienna, and the city was sealed off from the world. The Ottoman camp that sprawled outside the walls was larger and more opulent than Vienna itself. It was a mobile metropolis, complete with bathhouses, fountains, even execution grounds for dealing with deserters. Inside the walls, the defenders knew the clock was ticking. Starvation would kill them long before the Ottomans had to lift a finger. But here's where Kara Mustafa made his first critical mistake. He could have ordered an immediate assault on the walls. His men outnumbered the defenders so overwhelmingly that he probably would have taken the city in days, maybe even hours. But he didn't. Why? Because he wanted to capture Vienna intact. He wanted to plunder its treasures for himself, to walk through its palaces and claim them as his own. So instead of a quick, brutal assault, he chose the slow game. He chose to wage a war of engineering. The Ottomans were absolute masters of siege warfare, and they brought 5,000 specialized miners to Vienna for one purpose: to dig. The real battle wasn't going to be fought on the walls. It was going to be fought beneath them, in the dark and suffocating earth. Ottoman sappers began digging complex networks of tunnels, snaking toward the foundations of Vienna's fortifications. The plan was simple and terrifying: pack those tunnels full of gunpowder and blow the walls to pieces. The Viennese defenders weren't just sitting around waiting for the ground to explode beneath them. They dug their own counter-tunnels, trying to intercept the Ottoman miners before they could plant their charges. What followed was some of the most nightmarish combat imaginable. Hand-to-hand fighting in cramped, pitch-black tunnels, with pickaxes and shovels, by the flickering light of torches. If a tunnel collapsed on you, you didn't die quickly. You suffocated slowly in the darkness. And above ground, Ottoman artillery pounded the fortifications day and night, making sure no one inside could sleep, could rest, could even think straight. By August, the situation inside Vienna had gone from critical to hopeless. The heat made the stench of unburied bodies unbearable. Disease was ripping through the garrison faster than Ottoman muskets ever could. Dysentery, what they called the bloody flux, was killing more defenders than enemy fire. The starving population was hunting cats and rats for food. Children were crying from hunger. The elderly were dying in the streets. And through it all, Count Starhemberg refused to surrender. He knew exactly what would happen if the city fell. The inhabitants would be enslaved or massacred. Vienna would be looted down to its foundation stones. There was no negotiating with an army this size. There was only survival or annihilation. By early September, the walls were failing. Massive bastions that had stood for generations were being undermined and shattered by repeated explosions. The Ottomans breached the outer defenses and were fighting hand-to-hand in the rubble. Starhemberg sent desperate messengers slipping through enemy lines at night, carrying a simple message: no more time to lose. The city had maybe 3 days left before the final assault would overwhelm them completely. Kara Mustafa could taste victory. He began preparing his troops for the final blow, confident that soon he would be dictating terms from inside the imperial palace. But while the Ottomans were focused on the dying city in front of them, a storm was gathering to the north. King John Sobieski of Poland was mobilizing his army and marching south with incredible speed, honoring a defensive treaty with the Holy Roman Empire. It was a logistical miracle, moving tens of thousands of men through difficult terrain at a pace that shouldn't have been possible. Sobieski united his forces with German and Austrian armies, creating a combined relief force of nearly 80,000 men. And among those men were the most elite heavy cavalry in Europe, the legendary winged hussars. On September 11th, Ottoman sentries saw something that should have been impossible. Signal fires were burning on Kahlenberg Mountain, the high ground behind the Ottoman siege lines. Kara Mustafa had made a fatal strategic error. In his arrogance, he had never bothered to fortify that high ground. He genuinely believed that no Christian army would dare challenge him, not with 300,000 Ottoman soldiers sitting outside Vienna. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Dawn broke on September 12th with thick fog covering the battlefield. The relief army descended from the hills, and what followed was a full day of grinding, brutal infantry combat. Coalition forces fought through vineyards and ravines, slowly clearing the Ottoman positions. Kara Mustafa now faced an impossible dilemma. He had to split his attention between the relief army and the city he was still trying to capture. And here's where his arrogance sealed his fate. He refused to lift the siege. He kept his best troops, the elite janissaries, in the trenches around Vienna and sent exhausted irregulars to hold back the Polish king. It was a gamble born of pure hubris, and it was about to cost him everything. By late afternoon, the coalition infantry had secured a dominant position on the plains. The Ottoman lines were wavering but not yet broken. The battle could still go either way. And then King John Sobieski saw his moment. He gave the order to charge. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the ground began to tremble. From the forest on the slopes of Kahlenberg, 18,000 horsemen emerged. The winged hussars began to accelerate down the mountain, building speed, building momentum, an unstoppable avalanche of steel and horseflesh. This was the largest cavalry charge in the history of warfare, and it was designed to do more than just kill. It was designed to terrify. The hussars wore wooden frames on their backs, adorned with eagle feathers that created a terrifying humming noise as the wind rushed through them. Their armor shone in the late afternoon sun. Their lances were tipped with long pennants that snapped and cracked in the wind. To the Ottoman soldiers watching this descend upon them, it must have looked like a landslide of steel cascading down the mountain. The momentum was unstoppable. The sheer weight of those heavy cavalry hit the Ottoman lines with the force of a sledgehammer. Formations that had held all day shattered instantly. The psychological effect was devastating. Ottoman soldiers, already exhausted from months of siege work, already demoralized by the day's fighting, broke and ran. Panic spread through the ranks like a contagion. The Grand Vizier tried to rally his personal guard, but it was useless. The flood of Polish steel was simply overwhelming. Within 1 hour, one single hour, the battle was effectively over. The invincible Ottoman army dissolved into a chaotic mob, fleeing toward the Hungarian border, abandoning their artillery, their supplies, their immense tent city, everything. King John Sobieski rode into the Grand Vizier's tent, a complex of silk and gold that was larger than many European palaces, and composed a message to the Pope, paraphrasing Julius Caesar. "I came, I saw, and God conquered." The looting of the abandoned Ottoman camp began immediately. Soldiers found treasures beyond imagination: diamonds, gold, exotic spices. But there was one discovery that would have a lasting cultural impact: strange sacks of dark beans that the soldiers initially thought was camel feed. A Polish officer named Jerzy Kulczycki recognized them as coffee beans, and legend has it that this led to the founding of Vienna's first coffee house. It's a charming story, though the cultural impact pales in comparison to the geopolitical earthquake that had just occurred. The victory at Vienna was the turning point in a centuries-long struggle. The Ottoman Empire, which had been the dominant power in the Mediterranean and the Balkans, which had threatened Europe's heartland for generations, ceased to be a mortal threat to Central Europe. From this day forward, the Ottomans would be on the defensive, slowly receding over the coming centuries until the empire's final collapse. They would never again besiege a major European capital. For Vienna, the relief was nothing short of a miracle. The city's bells rang out in triumph, bells that had been silent or tolling for the dead for months. Count Starhemberg met King Sobieski in the ruins of the city's suburbs. The devastation was absolute, but the city still stood. This wasn't just a military victory, it was the salvation of a civilization. If Vienna had fallen, the road to Rome and Paris would have been open. The history of the world would have been written in a very different script. The tide turned because of the endurance of starving defenders and the thunder of Polish hooves on a September afternoon. Kara Mustafa paid the ultimate price for his failure. When he returned to Belgrade, he was executed on the Sultan's orders, strangled with a silk cord. His ambition had led 300,000 men to disaster and broken the back of Ottoman expansionism forever. Today, Kahlenberg is just a quiet hill overlooking modern Vienna, popular with tourists and hikers. It's hard to imagine that the fate of an entire continent was decided there in a single afternoon. The echoes of that cavalry charge have long since faded, but the line drawn in the sand on that September day remains indelible. It serves as a reminder that history hinges on the resolve of a few men willing to stand in the breach. 1683 marked the end of one era and the beginning of Europe's rise to global dominance. It was the day the sun began to set on the Ottoman dream of universal empire, and it all came down to 11,000 defenders who refused to surrender and 18,000 cavalry who refused to stop charging.